Welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welker, and you are listening to episode 114 of the podcast, or you're joining us here on YouTube. Today is Sunday, November the 4th, the end of daylight savings time if you live in the United States in 47 or 48 of the states. So remember to turn all your manual clocks back an hour. Enjoy that extra hour of sleep. Remember to check the batteries in your smoke alarms as well, folks. Now, let me introduce my co-host, who is in the same time zone as me for now, until Florida passes the bill to get rid of daylight savings time. Jeff, the Animal Wilson. Jeff, how you feeling on this early Sunday afternoon, my friend?
I feel awesome, Bill. I missed most of this card last night, but the extra hour gave me a chance to catch up on a lot of these fights. And Bill, I was pleasantly surprised with this card.
Yeah, it had a lot of hidden gems on here. You know, a lot of fights that were easy to overlook, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to go back and rewatch them. So thank you, America, for that extra hour of time this weekend. I think we both benefit from it greatly. Yeah, starting to get a little cool down here in Florida, Jeff. I'm growing my beard out because, you know, it's almost below 70 degrees. I have to prepare. I have to, some extra lengthy whiskers to protect from that Florida winter chill where it gets scarily close to, 65. So back up in New York, where I know it's been much colder than that lately, is where UFC 230 took place at the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden. There's always a sense of, oh shit, what's going to happen every time there's a card in New York. In this case, luckily, everything went fairly smoothly on fight night. It was just, the weeks leading up where we didn't know who the main event was going to be for the longest time. And then it got canceled several times. And that much anticipated co-main event between Dustin Poirier and Nate Diaz fell through. But I think that's a distant memory for a lot of people now because the UFC actually put together a good card. Credit to Daniel Cormier and Derek Lewis stepping up on 3 weeks notice to fill in that main event slot because it was meant to be Valentina Shevchenko and Sijara Eubanks for the vacated women's flyweight championship. But, the fans spoke and the UFC listened and they canceled that fight. And it's a good thing they did because Eubanks wouldn't have made weight for that contest since she was 3 pounds away from championship weight. But let's not start off with that, Jeff. Let's start with the champ, the first man to ever defend a title while holding 2 titles simultaneously, the first man to ever defend both the light heavyweight and the heavyweight championships. Not the first man to hold both titles, but the first to do it simultaneously and the first to defend both. And he did it in spectacular fashion, putting on a wrestling clinic against the Black Beast, Derek Lewis. I was a little concerned when I saw DC's weight, and he weighed in at 251. That's scary for a guy who typically fights at 205 or had for a big chunk of his career. So I was a little worried, maybe DC was a little too soggy for this one. And he didn't have enough time to prepare. Maybe he wasn't training, but and then, his shorts weren't fitting too well. He lost the fight with his t-shirt, getting into the octagon. So DC was looking like a hot mess. He had his thong strings hanging out the whole time during the fight. But man, once that cage door closes, that's a bad motherfucker. And he proved it once again, getting in there and taking on a challenge like Derek Lewis, who a lot of people for some reason thought had a puncher's chance here. What were your thoughts on the fight and the wardrobe malfunctions, Jeff?
Bill, I'll be honest with you. I wasn't too worried, man. Cormier, when the lights are on him, he's a different animal, dude. Especially in this heavyweight division. He goes to 15-0 as a heavyweight. And Bill, I was just so pleased with his performance, man. I got to go to the weigh-ins Friday night. and it was super fun. For some reason, everybody was booing Daniel Cormier. Everybody was cheering for Derek Lewis. I was like, dude, you haven't been watching this game for a long time if you think Derek Lewis is going to win. And we talked about how Daniel Cormier was well-rounded, how he can strike and grapple, whereas Derek Lewis can only strike and has not minimal grappling, but enough grappling to avoid maybe some other wrestlers in this heavyweight division. But dude, Daniel Cormier, excuse me, a former Olympian, captain of the Olympic team, if I'm not mistaken. So, dude, I don't think Derek Lewis was going to be ready for this guy in 3 weeks, maybe not even 3 months of training. So Daniel Cormier, his chain wrestling was phenomenal, Bill. He did this one move in, I believe it was the first round, where he had Derek Lewis in a front headlock and he was sprawled out a little bit. And as he was standing up and Derek Lewis was standing up, he picked his ankle and dropped him over again. Bill, it was so flawless, so beautiful. I mean, if you're a wrestling fan, if you're a grappling fan, you got to appreciate what Daniel Cormier did in there, because Derek Lewis is a big, strong guy. He is tough to hold down. He's tough to put down. And Daniel Cormier, he made it look like just another day in training camp, basically.
Yeah, I think unless you're involved in the grappling world, it's hard to understand how impressive Daniel Cormier's performance was, because he was shooting for a lot of outside singles, which is kind of his thing. And that's something that's very difficult to get away with in MMA, because when you put your head to the outside and you go after one leg, you expose your neck. And also, when you lean your head to the outside in MMA, you leave yourself open for a head kick, which John Jones exposed. Derek Lewis tried to expose it. He threw the head kick, letting Cormier know it was there, but he just didn't have the timing to land it when Cormier ducked in for that outside single. So there are very few people who can get away with an outside single leg. Even a high-level wrestler like Chris Weidman got caught with it, with that nasty knee when he went for that outside single against Yoel Romero at Madison Square Garden. And we'll talk a little more about that in just a few minutes. But there are very few people who get away with that outside single. Ben Askren is one of them as well, because he's so good at getting low and just grabbing that leg and pulling straight down and getting guys to the ground before they can get their hands around the neck, because you leave yourself open for that guillotine there. The snap down to the ankle pick, just everything. He did whatever he wanted. I don't think he missed a single takedown once he got a hold of Derek Lewis's legs. And what was impressive to me as well was his ability to hold Derek Lewis down, because we've seen Derek Lewis been taken down in the past. Roy Nelson comes to mind. Roy Nelson got him down, and Derek Lewis just bench pressed Roy Nelson off of him. For those who don't know, Roy Nelson, you may know him as a slugger these days, but he's a very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and a very high-level grappler, who I believe he has a couple of world championships in grappling, if I'm not mistaken. So that's kind of where I thought, Derek Lewis might have been able to succeed, is, he would get taken down a few times, but he would get back up. And that might frustrate Cormier, but it was just a total ground clinic by Daniel Cormier. He did whatever he wanted, and the finish was so slick. The way he took his back and already had the choke locked up, it was so tight. Those of us who have shorter limbs, once the arms are secured around the neck, Jeff, it's pretty much a done deal. And that was what happened with Derek Lewis. So awesome performance by Cormier, just flawless in every way. But still credit to Derek Lewis. He took this fight on short notice after telling the whole world, in addition to his balls being hot, that he was not ready for a championship fight. His cardio just wasn't there, but he still got in there, knowing that he was probably going to be a huge underdog, but also knowing that, he packed some heat in his fists, and when he's backed against the wall is when he's the most dangerous. So big credit to Derek Lewis. I don't think he loses any stock in this whatsoever. Yeah, he's got to work on his wrestling, but big deal. I think he's still going to be a fan favorite for a lot of reasons. So, any other thoughts on this main event here, Jeff?
No, I agree with you on all accounts. I thought that Derek Lewis has some huge balls for taking this fight on 3 weeks' notice, man. I don't think a lot of people are lining up to fight Daniel Cormier on 3 weeks' notice. And Bill, Cormier talked last night in the post-fight press conference about how his fight with Brock Lesnar in March is going to be his swan song. So, Bill, if Cormier leaves as champion and the title's vacated, I'd love to see Derek Lewis in half of that title picture for the next heavyweight champion.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. I still kind of have a feeling the Brock Lesnar fight's going to fall through. You informed me earlier today that Brock Lesnar, I guess, just won the WWE championship because one of their other superstars fell through. So I think if Vince McMahon pulls the plug on it, he probably has the ability to do so. Another school of thought is that Brock Lesnar does what Brock Lesnar wants. But I guess if he's going to be that WWE champion, he's got to look like it. So he's going to have to swell back up. I know he was deflating for a little bit there while he entered the USADA pool, but I don't know what he's looking like these days. Any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, dude. Actually, I think this is a great marketing opportunity for both the UFC and the WWE. This could be the first time, Bill, that we ever see the champions of both of these organizations go at it. The first, and market it that way. The two division UFC champion versus the WWE Universal champion. Dude, I think we sell right there. Just say no more. Show a couple of videos of Brock Lesnar throwing some people around in the WWE ring. Show all of DC's highlights at heavyweight. And Bill, I think that this fight stands to make a lot of money.
Yeah, co-promote it with the WWE. This is reminiscent of Rocky Balboa fighting Thunder Lips, the ultimate male from Rocky 3.
Dude, that is one of my favorite Rocky movies, man. That was a good one.
Yeah, it's one of the most cartoony ones with, Mr. T as the bad guy, but it's so good. It's a classic. But yeah, I mean, I think maybe a little co-promotion could, if it's done tastefully, could be a good thing. Put both titles on the line. Just don't make it like a ladder match or anything like that. Don't. But there's no denying that the WWE is a marketing mega giant, and the UFC has taken more than a few pages out of the WWE's marketing strategy guideline book. But you got to do what you got to do to promote your business. It is a business at the end of the day. So hopefully Cormier gets what he's looking for in that Lesnar fight. I think the only other fight he's interested in is John Jones, and he said he wants John Jones at 205 because he wants to redeem himself and do it where he lost to him. Maybe what he's really saying is he doesn't want to lose another title to John Jones and give him that satisfaction. But I think personally Cormier would have a better chance of beating John Jones at heavyweight. So I would kind of like to see that at heavyweight if John Jones were to get past Gustafsson, but that may be a conversation for another time. As for Derek Lewis, I don't know, man. There's some interesting fights for him out there, I guess. I would kind of like to see him and Ngannou go at it again, just so they could both redeem themselves for that awful fight they put on a couple of months ago. But I also think the Black Beast should take some time off. I mean, he in the last month he's fought, a lot. He's fought 7 rounds in the last 3.5 weeks. So let's give him a little bit of a break. So let's move on to the co-main event here. Really unfortunate night for Chris Weidman, who was fairly dominant in his fight with Jacare Souza, who was a last-minute replacement for Luke Rockhold, who was meant to fight Chris Weidman in a rematch last night. And it feels like deja vu, seeing Weidman winning a fight for 2 rounds in Madison Square Garden and then getting brutally knocked out towards the end of the third. This happened with Yoel Romero 2 years ago, and now we saw it again against Jacare. But credit to Jacare, man. He just kept coming forward and would not quit. He got rocked a couple of times. He tried to turn the fight into a brawl, and he would not let Chris Weidman relax for a second. Weidman did a great job of controlling the distance, using his jab. Awesome job, controlling space in the octagon and not letting Jacare get too close. And Jacare did not even try to shoot for a takedown. He wanted a box with Weidman, even though he was getting clearly outboxed. He wanted to keep turning it into a brawl. I don't think he wanted to waste any energy trying to take down an All-American wrestler. Even in those clinch exchanges they had, both guys kind of separated quickly. It seemed neither of them wanted anything to do with the grappling exchanges. So rough night for Chris Weidman. Awesome night for Jacare Souza. Embarrassing night for Dan Miragliotta for not stopping that fight as soon as Chris Weidman hit the ground. And, his head bounced off the cage pretty violently. And Jacare didn't want to hit him anymore, but Miragliotta allowed it to continue. So Jacare did what he had to do, but credit to him for being a gentleman, not wanting to hit the guy while he was out. So a lot of information I just threw at you, Jeff, there. Start wherever you like and give me your thoughts on this fight.
Yeah, Bill. Dude, I don't know what happened. Chris Weidman went in there with the right game plan. He was doing everything right, Bill. Like you said, controlling the distance. I loved his use of the jab. It was that jab that bloodied up Jacare Souza's nose. So, dude, I thought it was going to be an easy night. I thought he was going to grind it out, get the decision. But in that third round, man, I don't know what Jacare's corner said to him, but he came out, was in Weidman's face the entire round, and hurt him with, I believe it was an overhand right. I can't remember off the top of my head because there was so much going on this entire card. But dude, it was a punch that just dropped Weidman immediately. It was an overhand right that hit him right on the temple. Weidman goes down, and you could just see his legs just shut off, dude. He goes flying back against the cage, and I agree. I think Dan Miragliotta messed up a little bit on this one. Souza even tried to talk to him and looked at him and said, he's done. But other than that botched decision at the end, Jacare looked great in there, man. Well, at least in that third round. I think he just wanted it more. And, Souza's all class, man, for not wanting to continue punishing Weidman because he was clearly out of it.
Yeah, for sure. So really unfortunate for Chris Weidman, who has now lost 4 of his last 5. He was knocked out in all 4 of those fights. So I personally would have questioned the chin of Weidman, but I thought it held up really well in this fight. Jacare hit him with some big shots in some of those exchanges before finishing him in that third round. But it's a really difficult situation for Chris Weidman. I think, he looked really lean in this fight. I think the move for him may be to move up to light heavyweight. I don't know if the weight is a factor in him, not being able to take these shots. I don't know how much he's actually cutting. I know he is a very large guy, so maybe going up to 205 is the move for him. As far as Jacare, I feel like he kind of deserves a rematch with Robert Whittaker. If Whittaker were to defend the title against Kelvin Gastelum, I think Jacare is deserving. He's always been at the top. He got robbed a couple of times, like in his decision loss to Yoel Romero. So I think, reward the guy. Some people are saying have him fight Israel Adesanya for the number 1 contender spot. I would like to see Adesanya get another, top 10 guy. He just beat his first top 10 opponent last night, and he looked awesome doing it. And I think he definitely passed the test that a lot of people were curious about, facing a high level grappler like Derek Brunson. But I would definitely like to see Adesanya get another top 10 middleweight before seeing a title shot. And I think, Jacare is deserving of the winner of Robert Whittaker and Kelvin Gastelum. What are your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, dude, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, Swoza's lost to both Kelvin Gastelum and Robert Whitaker, but I think he's worked his way back up, man. So I'd like to see him be next in line for that title. I think he's deserved it. I don't believe he's had a title shot before in the middleweight division. So yeah, I'd like to see him get it, man. I think he deserves it. He beat a really tough dude in Chris Weidman. He's dominated in this division with his submissions and his striking, which I underestimated it before, Bill. But after his last win before before the fight with Weidman, I changed my mind about it, and his striking came out again last night, man. Like we said, Weidman was doing everything right, dude. I just don't know what happened at the end. I think Souza just wanted it more because he came out, was in his face in that third round. And Bill, I just wanted to address what you said about the weight cutting for Weidman, because when I saw him get on the scale on Friday night, he just looked a little depleted. He looked like he didn't have the best weight cut. Because I always try to look at like the stomach and the abs when people cut weight, and Weidman was just looking super bony, like there wasn't a lot of muscle there. So I don't think that a move to 205 hurts him. I'd like to see what he can do with a little bit more weight on him, with some more power behind his punches. So I think move to light heavyweight might be good for him.
Yeah, and with his wrestling credentials, I think he would do really well at 205. I think there's a lot of interesting matchups for him there, in a very empty division. Even with those 4 knockout losses in his last 5 fights, I think a fighter of the caliber of Chris Weidman, you could throw him right into the top 5 at 205 and nobody would complain about it for a second. So I think that may be the move for him. That's what I'd like to see for him. I would like to see Jacare get that title shot. I am also interested in a rematch between Jacare and Luke Rockhold. If Luke Rockhold could make it to a fight night, that would be great. It would be good to have him back and active in the division. So let's talk about the future of the middleweight division a little bit more, with the addition of Jared Cannonier, who looked amazing last night in his middleweight debut against David Branch. So Cannonier, had kind of a rough go at 205. I think he was just a little bit too small. Some people thought he wouldn't be able to make middleweight, but he was able to do it on 3 weeks' notice, technically filling in for Luke Rockhold, because Jacare had to fill in for Luke Rockhold. So Jared Cannonier gets the call to fill in for Jacare in the fight against David Branch. And, Cannonier proved that he could definitely be a force in this middleweight division, bringing a lot of power down with him from light heavyweight. And I'm really excited to see him added to this division. And, he actually even looked like the smaller guy against David Branch, who has also fought at 205, as you well know. So what were your thoughts on the performance of Jared Cannonier last night, Jeff?
Bill, super impressed, man. David Branch came out and immediately shot for a takedown, was clinching up, trying to get Cannonier on the ground. And dude, there was just a strength discrepancy, man. Jared Cannonier was so strong, dude. He was just able to muscle his way out of being taken down, basically. He did a good job of getting his hips back too, but his strength played a huge factor. And Bill, I always thought, I was looking at a picture of him at 205, and he looked really pudgy. And dude, he looked great last night at middleweight. He was ripped. His abs were sticking out a lot. He looked like he had a comfortable weight cut. Looked hydrated, and dude, he just took it to David Branch, man. I don't think that David Branch, I've always thought that he was kind of small for light heavyweight. I think his division is more middleweight, but Jared Cannonier, man, he's probably so used to throwing around those bigger, stronger guys at 205 and dealing with their power, and David Branch just was not enough in this fight. Jared Cannonier was clearly stronger, and like I said, man, that as soon as they locked up, you could tell who the stronger fighter was. And Jared Cannonier just had way too much power for David Branch last night.
Yeah, for sure. So he looked phenomenal. I'm really excited to see him added to this middleweight lineup. I think he has a bright future there. Light heavyweight just wasn't the right class for him. I know it's a big cut to get down from 205 to 185, but I was glad to see him do it easily. He said the weight cut was easy, so you got to take him at his word. I'm going to jump around a little bit because we have a lot to cover. I want to talk about Israel Adesanya. I briefly mentioned him earlier, and his test taking on a top 10 middleweight and Derek Brunson, and taking on a really high level grappler. The issue with Derek Brunson is he never really seemed to fix the things that were wrong in his game. And I'm talking specifically about leading with his face. He does this in grappling exchanges, and he does it in striking exchanges. This is what got him knocked out by Robert Whitaker, and this is what got him knocked out by Israel Adesanya. I mean, he was really, really trying to get Adesanya to the ground. He was grabbing his shorts a couple of times, which caused Adesanya to flip him off in the middle of the cage. There's a lot of bad blood between these two, which is why I was really looking forward to this fight. And Israel Adesanya, with just that laser accuracy, putting Derek Brunson down with a shot to the temple, which you don't see too often. But he dropped him hard. Derek Brunson was able to stand right up immediately. It did seem like a flash knockout, but overall, definitely a good stoppage by Herb Dean, I believe. It could have been bad if he let it go on, if he let him stand up and he took a shin to the face. I think that would have been unnecessary damage. So I think luckily for Derek Brunson, it was stopped when it was. But Israel Adesanya, really passing the test here. And I think he has the potential to be a big star in this division. What were your thoughts on his performance, Jeff?
Bill, I was super impressed with Is He Real Adesanya. We've been a little critical, or at least I have been a little bit critical about his grappling. But Bill, it's clear that he's been working on it. There were times where Derek Brunson almost had him to the ground, and Adesanya was able to get out and get his ankle out or get his leg out of danger and spin around really well. And Bill, there was one point in the fight where Adesanya thought about taking Brunson's back, and he almost did too, but Brunson was able to get up really quick. So it looks like Adesanya's been working on his grappling, but dude, not to take anything away from him, but I like what you said about Brunson coming in with his head first. That's how you get knocked out. That's how you get guillotined. And whenever I see that, it's for lack of a better term, it's stupid to go in like that. Brunson wasn't setting up any of his takedowns with his hands. He was just shooting in head first. Adesanya, good on him that he caught that and was able to react quick enough, because it was a knee that stunned Brunson as he was going in head first. His hands were under his chin. He was asking to get hurt. And Adesanya, a very, very sharp striker. You don't want to make too many mistakes against him. So Adesanya, his striking was crisp. His grappling was pretty solid, able to stay on his feet the whole fight. And Bill, in the post-fight press conference, I'm not going to lie to you, Bill, I was impressed with how he was talking, how he was answering questions. So Adesanya's got that it factor, man. He's undefeated. He's, I believe, moves to 15-0 as a professional. And Bill, I'm excited to see what's next for him, but I don't think he deserves a shot at Jacare yet. I think I agree with you. I think he needs to be tested one more time. I'd like to see him against a grappler who can mix it up in MMA, because like we said, Derek Brunson yesterday was looking a little one-dimensional. So I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. Maybe the loser of Whitaker versus Gastelum. If Gastelum loses, I'd like to see Adesanya against him. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, that would be a fun fight for sure. Maybe Luke Rockhold is still in the picture. It seems like there would be a big size discrepancy there, but I think it's an interesting matchup. That's a guy who can really grapple well. If Chris Weidman sticks around in this middleweight division, maybe that's a thing. It depends on how the UFC is feeling about Chris Weidman. If they want to try and put him out of his misery to springboard to the next superstar, and they don't want to encourage him to move up to 205, then that's another possibility. I think there's a lot of options. I think the middleweight division is really exciting right now, and a lot of things. And I don't think Derek Brunson's out of the picture either. I think he needs to fix some things in his game. leading with his head is how he got head kicked by Jacare as well. But, before that, he had knockout wins over Machida and Dan Kelly. I think he's a guy who early in his career got away with being really athletic and really strong and really reckless. And if he cleans things up and stops flying across the cage head first, which he has shown a little bit more control, but you still have those bad habits from wrestling, because in wrestling you use your face to control your opponent very frequently. It's a very common strategy, but in MMA it just leaves you open for too many strikes, and fortunately Derek Brunson has paid for that. But again, if he cleans up a couple of things, he's definitely still an elite fighter. All right, Jeff, I'm gonna go down the line here, and I'm gonna give you a couple of fights, just for the sake of time, and then you tell me which one you'd like to comment on the most. So Carl Robertson, who came off of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, very explosive fighter. I think they're definitely trying to build a market behind him. He had a very dominant performance over Jack Marshman. Even showed some good wrestling and some good grappling, ground control over a strong veteran like Jack Marshman. I think it was a good test for Carl Robertson, and he definitely passed. Jordan Rinaldi able to control Jason Knight with his wrestling and prove once again that rubber guard is absolutely useless. And then Shaman Moraes and Julio Arce in one of the bloodiest fights I have ever seen. Julio Arce got cut and was just spewing blood all over the octagon, all over Shaman Moraes, all over Paul Felder's phone. And these guys were just completely blood red at the end of this fight. So out of those three, Jeff, which one piques your interest the most?
So, Bill, unfortunately, I didn't get to watch Shaman Moraes versus Julio Arce. Although I heard good things about that fight. I was looking for it all over the internet today, Bill, and nobody has the video for this. So I'm going to have to go back and watch it somehow. But I did really enjoy Jordan Rinaldi versus Jason Knight, man. Jordan Rinaldi just dominated this one. His wrestling was a little too much for Jason Knight. I thought Jordan Rinaldi did a great job of back control, especially in that second round. But Bill, Jason Knight, such a tough dude, just refusing to tap, was able to fight off the hand successfully. And, I'm excited for both of these guys. Jason Knight, always a very entertaining fighter. And I didn't know much about Jordan Rinaldi going into this one, but dude looks great at featherweight. I don't think he struggled to cut the weight too much. And, his grappling is awesome. It's phenomenal. Every time Jason Knight tried to turn the position of being when he had got his back taken, Jordan Rinaldi would switch his legs, switch the body triangle to keep that pressure on Jason Knight. So I'm excited to see what's next for both of these guys.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see Jason Knight. Now this makes 4 losses in a row, and I think his inability to get up when he's held down by strong wrestlers is really hindering his ability to win fights. It's as simple as that. He goes for rubber guard a lot. He goes for body triangles from the bottom, which are just stalling techniques. Those are things that you do if you're up on points in a jiu-jitsu tournament. They're just not things that you do in an MMA fight, especially if you're not offering any attacks off of them, which he wasn't. I'm a big fan of Jason Knight. I was really high on him from his debut fight in the UFC, and I always look forward to his fights. But I think they've got to put him in there with somebody that doesn't have wrestling credentials, just so he can get some confidence back. And in the meantime, he's got to work on his scrambling skills and maybe his submissions off of his back as well. He was compared early in his career to the Diaz brothers because of his build and his volume of punches on the feet. But yeah, credit to Jordan Rinaldi. He had a great game plan, and Jason Knight is a tough guy to put away. Like you said, he's one of the toughest guys in that division. All right, let's move on to who was meant to be the main event last night, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. Sijara Eubanks. So I believe this is her first actual fight in the UFC. So what happened a couple of weeks ago was the UFC announced that Sijara Eubanks was going to fight Valentina Shevchenko, the main event, UFC 230. The fans did not like that, so UFC scrambled to put together Derek Lewis versus Daniel Cormier, and the fans seem to be happy with that one. Sijara Eubanks flipped out, cursed out Dana White, was pissed that Joe Rogan didn't know who she was very insulted, understandably so. She was given a title shot and then it was taken out from underneath her. Um, so you can understand that she's pissed about that. But then she talked all that shit. She's given another fight against Roxanne Modafferi, and then she doesn't make weight. And this is obviously a problem for her because she wasn't able to fight in the Ultimate Fighter Season 25 finale for the flyweight championship the first time because she had kidney failure trying to make weight. So obviously this is not the weight class for her. The UFC needs to make her move up in weight. I think if she had lost this fight, it would have been her last fight in the UFC ever. I don't think there would have been any way for her to redeem herself enough to make it back again. But luckily for her, she did win the fight against a very tough and very game fighter, Roxanne Modafferi, who I kind of thought Roxanne had won the second round of this fight. I think you can make that argument, but the judges all saw it 30-27 for Sijara Eubanks. So good for her. Hopefully she gets her nutrition in line. I know she's working with the UFC Performance Institute. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a long time before she sees a title shot, unless she moves up in weight and has an impressive win at bantamweight, which I think should be the move for her. What are your thoughts on all this Weight Watchers drama and her actual performance against Roxanne Modafferi, Jeff?
Bill, her performance was fine. That's kind of what I expected from from Sijara Eubanks. But Bill, I'm just disappointed, man. Eubanks walks around with a chip on her shoulder, and listen, that's fine, but you gotta prove the naysayers wrong, and I think Sijara Eubanks failed to do that. She was getting booed the entire time, booed when they announced that she won, booed at the weigh-ins when I was there, and it's like, listen, if you want to prove a point, let's start by making weight. Because that's one of the reasons that nobody wanted to see her in the main event was because we were all worried that she couldn't make weight, and then boom, she doesn't make weight. So I think she needs to get that in order first. And I know I'm a bigger guy saying that, which is a little hypocritical, but I'm not getting paid to make 125 pounds. You know why, Bill? Because I know I'm never making 125 pounds. That is why.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, I'm all for her having a chip on her shoulder. I think that's very appealing. I thought that was, part of what made her entertaining on the show, and it made you root for her a little bit. She comes from a rough background, and I'm all for people going heel. Turn on the crowd and tell them to fuck off for booing you and everything like that. But also do your job. And half of your job is making weight. The other half is actually fighting. And, if you want to split it into thirds, another third should be promoting the fight. But that seems to be optional for a lot of men and women in this day and age. And then they complain about how they're not promoted enough, even though they don't do the legwork to promote themselves. That's neither here nor there. So she gets the win. I still don't think she'll see a title shot for a long, long time. Not at 125 anyway. If she's able to move up to 135, then, we may be singing a different tune. All right. I want to go over just a couple more things. I want to touch on almost every fight on this card, Jeff. So Lyman Good with a nasty, nasty clinch uppercut knockout of Ben Saunders, who had a really quick turnaround, even though his last fight was really just a grappling match in which he was submitted. Still a really quick turnaround for Ben Saunders, who's getting up there in years. And then Shane Burgos getting rocked on the feet by Kurt Hollabaugh, put down with a nasty 1-2, and then keeps his feet on Hollabaugh's hips to control the distance, controls his posture, and rolls into a really nasty armbar and cranked it really hard. Two really impressive finishes. Jeff, which one impressed you the most?
Oh, Bill, that's a tough one, man. I really liked both of these because both guys were in trouble, man. Both of the winners were in trouble. Burgos had just been put down, like you said, starts putting the feet on the hips, controlling distance, and then throws his legs up to catch Hollabaugh in a very, very tight armbar. And and all this happened in the first round, by the way, for both of these fights. And Lyman Good was eating some nasty knees from Ben Saunders in that clinch, and he said, "You know what? Fuck this. I'm just gonna uppercut you." And it worked. Ben Saunders got too comfortable eating those shots, and that last one put him down. Again, all in the first round. So, Bill, I can't choose between these two. I loved both finishes. They were awesome.
I would say I was slightly more impressed with Shane Burgos just because of the way he recovered, and then he pulled off the submission in front of his hometown crowd. You got to be happy for a guy pulling something off like that. But yeah, Lyman Good, amazing. So he was in that clinch with Ben Saunders, which is not where you want to be against, the tallest guy in the division. I think by a lot. And, Lyman Good is not a small welterweight. He's 6 foot and, very heavily muscled. So what he did was he got inside control on the clinch, which means he got his arm inside of Ben's arm and did a one-handed clinch on the back of Ben's head and then started pulling his head down into those uppercuts. And after the first one, Ben didn't let the clinch go, which is what you should do once somebody gets that inside control on that tie clinch and starts landing uppercuts. But he held on to it and basically, pulled himself down into those uppercuts a little bit more, which is not a good thing if you like protecting your brain health. So yeah, very impressive performance by Lyman Good, who, it is one of these very consistent guys. I mean, he's never been finished. He had a close split decision loss in his last fight, and he also has a loss on his record to Ben Askren. So, that's something that could come up down the line. If he's able to string some wins together and Ben Askren ends up doing well, which, by the way, I'm hearing rumors that Ben Askren is either going to fight Robbie Lawler or Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And those are the two names on the table. I think both of those are really fun and interesting fights for very different reasons. And I'm really excited to find out when Ben Askren is going to make his UFC debut. I think we can put a bow on UFC 230 here, Jeff. Awesome card overall, and a lot of interesting things could come out of it. And we'll just see how it goes. We'll see what's next for the double champ Daniel Cormier, and on down the line, a lot of exciting things for the middleweight division. And let's move on to UFC Fight Night 139 from the Pepsi Center in Denver, Colorado, where interestingly, the Korean Zombie Chan Sung Jung and Yair Rodriguez are headlining ahead of Donald Cerrone in his hometown and Mike Perry. I find this interesting because, even though Cerrone's been very hot and cold lately and Perry's lost a bunch of fights, these are two guys who are much more well-known than the two fighters in the main event. And Yair Rodriguez has had a rocky year with the UFC after getting cut, reinstated, and then pulling out of his fight. So it's interesting to see him in that main event slot. I was very surprised to see that. But all that aside, that's an awesome fucking fight because you have a guy with really flashy striking and a guy that's really, really hard to put away in the Korean Zombie. So what are your thoughts on this main event in Denver next weekend, Jeff?
Bill, real quick before we get into that, did you want to address the Lando Venata versus Matt Favola fight from UFC 230?
Yes, I did. Thank you for reminding me about that.
Yeah, so Bill, let me just do a quick recap for you because this fight, I thought it was fight of the night, Bill, and dude, madness all over the place. First round goes 10-9 for Favola, who dropped Lando Venata a few times. With some very, very hard shots. Then round 2 comes in. Lando Venata comes out swinging some flashy spinning moves. Drops Matt Favola as well 2 or 3 times. And then round 3, they were just swinging for the fences. Bill, I'll be honest with you. I didn't think it was a draw. I thought Matt Favola did enough to win. I thought he got rounds 1 and 3 by a score of 10-9. But I assume that somebody scored round 2 10-8 for Lando Venata, which I find that hard to agree. I think that while Matt Favola was down, I don't think that Venata was on the verge of finishing him at any point during that round. But what do you think, Bill? Do you think that the draw was a good call?
So I tried to watch this fight as objectively as possible. Obviously, Matt Favola is part of our Gracie Tampa family here. He had Matt Arroyo in his corner. Even though he's moved up to start training at Sarah Longo, he also had Ray Longo in his corner. I actually, watching this fight, thought that the decision could have gone to Lando Venata. Now, after like really thinking about it and seeing the strike count in that third round and seeing that Matt Favola had more significant strikes, I think a draw is really the right call here because I don't know who actually won that fight. The first and second rounds were really mirror images of each other,
Yeah.
even down to the ending. They both wound up with arm-in guillotines at the very end of the round. I think Matt Favola's might have been a little bit tighter, but crazy that they both dropped each other almost in the same way. They're both throwing spinning wheel kicks. This was a crazy fucking fight. And that third round was really close. Apparently Favola outlanded Venata, but I felt like Lando controlled the octagon a little bit more. And he, I guess he missed a lot, but it looked like he was doing more in that third round. I would have probably scored it to him if I were watching it live. I could have seen a 10-8 for Favola in the first round. I could have seen a 10-8 for Venata in the second round. I could have seen a 9-9 in the third round. I could have seen the first and the third going to Favola and a 10-8 for Venata. I could have seen a 10-8 for Favola and then 2 and 3 going to Venata. So I would entertain all of the arguments for all of the above. So I think you got to give it a draw. I would like to see it again because I thought it was a really fun fight. So why not run it back? And thank you for reminding me about that, Jeff, because I did really want to cover that fight and would have been disappointed if we forgot to talk about it.
Yeah, no worries. But anyway, back to Korean Zombie versus Yair Rodriguez. Bill, I'm super excited. Korean Zombie has not fought in quite some time. He's been taking care of some stuff in his personal life. But Bill, I was excited for the original fight. This was supposed to be Frankie Edgar, but unfortunately he's injured. And Bill, I don't know what happened. I don't think that Yair Rodriguez deserves to be in the spot that he's in. Obviously he's had his trouble with the UFC. He had to pull out of the last fight. So I don't know, man. I mean, I know that they're trying to give the fans an exciting fight. Yair Rodriguez is definitely a flashy fighter, very exciting. But I don't know about how I feel about him in the main event spot.
Yeah, it's interesting that he got this opportunity, but hopefully he does the right thing and takes advantage of it, and then, calls out Zabit Magomed Sharipov, and we finally get to see that fight that we've been wanting. So he needs to show that he was not afraid to take that fight, which, some people in the UFC seem to think he was, and for a good reason. And the Korean Zombie, always fun. This guy was legendary in the WEC. So people who are longtime fans of MMA, of course, remember some of his epic wars with Leonard Garcia. 2 fights with Leonard Garcia that were just awesome. If you want to really see what the Korean Zombie's all about, go back and watch those fights. From WEC 48 and the other was UFC Fight Night sometime in 2011. Those were both amazing fights. He's got a win over Dustin Poirier before Poirier moved up in weight, and he had a tough fight with Jose Aldo where Aldo finished him. But awesome fighter. I'm really excited for this main event. And Cowboy and Mike Perry, this is an interesting fight. I don't think this is a great fight for Cowboy Cerrone. Skill for skill, I think he's better everywhere than Mike Perry, but Donald Cerrone fights the worst when he's emotionally invested in a fight. He does his best work when he can be playful and relaxed in there. But when he's got a problem with the guy he's fighting, the toughest cowboy doesn't always make it to the ring. He's always a slow starter, which is dangerous against a guy with the power of Mike Perry. And, he wears his emotions on his sleeve. It was his downfall in his fight against Nate Diaz. It was his downfall every time he's fought for a title in both WEC and the UFC. So you got to be concerned for him there. But, maybe he's sharpened some things up and, he's trained with Mike Perry a little bit. So maybe he knows something we don't, and he's going to be able to exploit some things about Mike Perry. But interesting matchup here. What are your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, man. Dude, as distasteful as the trash talk has been for Mike Perry, he's come out dressed as a Native American looking for a cowboy. As distasteful as it's been, it has been entertaining, Bill. And I think that he might be getting into Donald Cerrone's head a little bit, which, as you said, is it means that Donald Cerrone may not put his best foot forward, but who knows? I mean, he's got an issue with the gym because Mike Perry is also with Greg Jackson now, and Donald Cerrone felt like he was being shunned a little bit. So I don't know, man. I mean, maybe changing camps will help him out a little bit. So we'll see. I'm actually really excited for this fight, maybe even more than the main event itself. I feel like I always love when there's a little bit of bad blood between fighters, and that whole issue with the gym thing definitely adds fuel to the fire. So if Donald Cerrone can, survive the early onslaught that I think Mike Perry's going to bring, and really, if Cowboy can get going in that second round, I think he can edge out a decision. But like you said, man, he's a slow starter, and that's hurt him before. So Mike Perry, a very explosive fighter. He hasn't looked his best before in the UFC up until he changed camps. To join Greg Jackson. So we'll see, man. I think Mike Perry, I think he's starting to mature a little bit in this MMA game, at least in his in terms of his skills.
Yeah, for sure. I think if Cowboy Cerrone maybe takes the strategy that he used against Cowboy Oliveira, I think he could take Mike Perry down and really drown him on the mat. From what I understand, Mike Perry is a legitimate purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I know he was training with Julian Williams in Orlando for a little while, who is now, Jacare's coach, of course. And I know he spent some time grappling with Jacare, but, Cowboy is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which a lot of people forget because, he likes to stand and bang so much. Moving on down the line, we have the return of Jermaine Durandame against Raquel Pennington. This is actually a really interesting fight. I think these are two really tough bantamweights. I think it's far enough removed from Jermaine Durandame running from the featherweight division that we can let that go and look forward to some exciting fights for her. Then we have, I'm just going to rattle off a couple here that are jumping off the page to me, Jeff, and then you let me know what you're looking forward to. Ray Borg and Joseph Benavidez. I think this is actually a fun fight, even though I think the men's flyweight division doesn't have much of a future. And then one person to keep your eye on, Jeff, Macy Barber, who is coming off of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, just 20 years old. She's 5-0, and I believe 4 of those wins are by way of knockout. She's very well-rounded, very young, very energetic. Her nickname is The Future, and she's taking on Hannah Cyphers. So keep an eye on that fight, Jeff. I believe this is her debut in the actual UFC outside of the Contender Series, but she was given an immediate contract off of that show. And then we have Chad Skelly and Bobby Moffitt. Chad Skelly, always fun to watch. And then if you're really into grappling, Beneil Dariush and Thiago Moises will be a really fun fight. Moises has a really great guillotine. Beneil Dariush, obviously a really good wrestler. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic for me. And that's all that's really jumping off the page for me, Jeff. Any comments on the fights I pointed out, or is there anything that I'm missing here?
I'll be honest. This card isn't looking super exciting to me. Benavidez versus Borg, um, not super interesting. Maybe uh, maybe when I watch it, it'll be a little bit more interesting, especially now that Mighty Mouse will not be with the UFC for a little bit. So maybe they can breathe some life into this. Get some new matchups going because they've both fought and lost to Mighty Mouse. But dude, I'm really excited for Pennington versus Jermaine Durandamy, man. I know Durandamy gets a lot of flack for running from Cyborg, but I mean, I would run from Cyborg. Um, and, you know, I'm a big dude, so um, let's see. So Durandamy, super, super tough striker. Very, very good Muay Thai. I think she can give Pennington a lot of problems. But Pennington, she's got so much heart. I think she's pretty well rounded. I think she's no slouch in striking either. So I think this is going to be a really, really interesting matchup. And it could shake up the bantamweight division, you know, especially if something goes awry with the Amanda Nunes versus Chris Cyborg fight that's coming up in a few months.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how Raquel Pennington bounces back from that nasty TKO loss to Amanda Nunes, and it'll be interesting to see what happens after the Nunes and Cyborg fight. It's kind of interesting where you have a division basically with only one person in it, and that's the champion in Cyborg. So yeah, but this is definitely a fun fight. Raquel Pennington is really gritty. I think if she puts the pressure on Jermaine Durandamy, she can have a lot of success here. But if this fight stays at range, it's going to be a long night for Raquel Pennington. So that should be a really fun fight. I'm looking forward to the Dariush and Thiago Moises fight personally. And Macy Barber is an interesting character as well. I think she's got a lot of energy. I think she's got that. She's got almost like a Paige Van Zant, Sage Northcutt vibe, where the UFC kind of want to get behind her. So it'll be interesting to see if she's able to perform on the biggest stage as well as she has thus far in her career, which is very well. All right, so I think we can put a cap on this one, Jeff, unless there's anything else you want to get off your chest.
Nope, I got nothing for you this week, Bill.
All right. Well, we've got a little long this week, and I had some beers and some breweries I visited in the past couple of weeks that I wanted to get into, but we'll save that for another time when there's not as much to talk about. We got into a lot of MMA this week, and we can put the booze aside for another time because that's always a timeless conversation. If you want to get a hold of Jeff on social media, let him know what you're thinking and drinking. It's at @animal_Wilson on Twitter. And of course, you guys know how to get a hold of me. It's at MMA on the Rocks, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anywhere on the internet. Send me an email if you want, MMAonTheRocks@gmail.com. That's all we got for this week, folks. Until next time, cheers, everybody. Goodbye.